It began down in the hole, the cutting below Exeter Queen Street. A railway yard like a royal parade ground. For all the majesty of the Southern came here, King Arthur, Sir Kay, Morgan le Fay, a sort of turn round table after the crusade from Waterloo. And from here, engines with regimental numbers took the war west of the Credy, through the North Devon outback, to forge a link with Arthur's seat at Tintagel. The old green banner of the Southern still has the air of a mission, and where else but a cathedral city would put an altar rail around a departure bay. But Camelot has been lost. The links are overrun. The furthest outpost pushed back to Barnstaple. But you still drop down from Central along the right-hand curve of the Exeter incline to dive through 200 yards of echoing tunnel. A squad of banker engines patrolled it, escorts for the Devon Belle, the Atlantic coasters. And driver Proust remembers the double-headed blast bouncing off the roof, swamping the cab, and knocking a young fireman flat with noise. For a moment you hover over St. David's before the swoop down to the old Great Western Line. Brunel's six-footers lorded it down there, granting a passport to southern trains from here to Cowley Bridge. So you come into St. David's with that keep to one side, immigrants only feeling reserved for Platform 4. For God's wonderful railway is still there, as plain as the concrete letters over the station entrance. Too deep for new brooms. The intercities clatter up from Cornwall, bound for stops with the old western names, Cheltenham, Westbury, Reading. The old water tower is a monument to the steamers, when long-distance crews bedded down in it. Dormitories, roofed over with a few thousand gallons of water. New men were warned, if you have to get up in the night, don't pull anything. There's no steam to smother the footbridge, but enough sunlight and suitcases to give that old excitement of a mainline stop. And you'll remember a different time, a time beyond compare, when high days began on high platforms and ended with a flash of sea green beyond the lattice work of the home signal. At the northern end of St. David's is a controlled crossing where main road traffic tries to beat mainline trains. The barriers snip off the passing parade with every notch on the timetable. You can't raise a camera without someone putting on a daily act hell-bent on suicide. The road north is hemmed in by stockyards on both sides for a mile and a half to Cowley Bridge. The landlords always reserve the right of way with scant regard for southern trains. Guard Jimmy Beer remembers shunting 30 Barnstaple wagons across this main line, just 2 minutes ahead of a Plymouth Express. The kind of thing turns a young man's fancies into thoughts of insurance. Cowley Bridge, where the Taunton Road will swing away to the right. So let's look back along the train to see that main line swerve northwards. Once over the viaduct, the stretch to Crediton is flat upland country with a slight down gradient to help the timetable. Driver Tom Davy remembered how southern timings were tight, with a running time for each section. Losing a minute on one meant making up for it on the next fast stretch. But some of the guards wouldn't flag an early start. They'd keep the train sitting there strictly to schedule. Until the very last lap, no guard could control a driver who wanted to set up a record, say, from Chapelton to the junction. Newton St Cyrus, with only 3 trains daily. In the old days, it was a good stop for tips. Being the last stop before Exeter, London passengers wanted time and to spare for the changeover, with a bit of change over for the guard. One traveller arrived at Exeter to see his Waterloo disappear up the incline. "Driver, what went wrong your end? I tipped the guard my end." "I'll tell you what, sir, you tipped the wrong bloody end." Crediton. 6 lorries once served the yards. Besides the farms, there were factories in the town making sweets. So there was an assorted mixture of comings and goings with grain, fertilizers, machinery. And there's a Victorian box with the same kind of old-fashioned hospitality, where we together watched the ballast train come up from the railway's own quarries at Meldon. The box holds a watching brief on the 15 miles of freight line, besides controlling another 15 of the Barnstaple line, down to the nearest passing loop at Exford. Out of Crediton, we eased to the right, as if to make room for all those ghosts, for over there ran the Plymouth part of the Atlantic Coast Express, cresting the Dartmoor purple to the blue of Plymouth Sound. And wartime trains took the safest West Country route through Yoford, where there were no quiet nights for signalmen. New rails spread out to take American Red Cross trains until D-Day, with blood-red benedictions on each coach. And here it is, Yoford, and no time to stop, for it's all quiet nights and days without signalmen. Past Yoford is the site of Culford Junction, where the old Plymouth line will part company. There it goes, leaving us on the one remaining tendon of the withered arm. Once 10 daily services, 17 on Saturdays, brought the summer crowds to Torridge and beyond. Coaches packed with the sand dwellers up to Morthoe and Croyd, and the first-class travellers for the hotels down in Coombe. And once, way back in the 30s, all those +4s and Tweed for the little Linton trains, which whistled away through Barham and got lost in Exmoor landscapes. Lapford, with a platform offset on each side of the Exeter road. So let's look back at Rail Clerk Frank Beer's memories of those Best Kept Station Awards, when country staffs filled out station names in pansies and pebbles. Lapford was 5 times champion. Well, most of the working parts went with the flowers, though up the road some of it's still in partnership, giving an all day all clear to Sharps Express. The Falvale gloom of a decaying halt shares the summer silence with deserted yards. The old dairy factory closed years back. The building is a store for second-hand goods, used bargains in a worn-out siding. But from here to Exford, the route is all summer green, laced with the loops of the Tall. The new box at Exford stands on the bank of the Tall. The old one resisted the impulse for years, then took the plunge, helped out by a dredger, which knocked it off its feet. They built the new box wrong way round, which helps it, I suppose, to keep an eye on the river. There were extensive sidings back of this hotel, and beyond this wall, a weekly market for neighbouring farms. This outhouse was a coal store, with its own rail siding coming up through all that greenery. Today it's the only crossing point on the line, and for a moment the railway noises are all hushed in the sleepy summer murmur of the Tall, and the older traveller in the corner seat dreams of a time of challenge and driving steam through winter. Except for the rare signal lamp, you drove by sound, counting seconds for the next echo. 1, 2. Beyond the buffer beam there was nothing but flooded fields, from Newbridge to the Pilbridge, the track a causeway between water, and the regulator slammed shut for the river bend by Portsmouth Arms, where the water would suck every bit of ballast out of the track. There was little to guide you into lamp-lit platforms to make sure your tail end was comfortably in. Otherwise, you gave the customers a 10-foot drop into a ditch. So you tried to pick out of the dark some regular marker to stop your cab opposite a white-painted fence, or the red echo of your furnace in greenhouse glass. Young firemen, eager but green, were told to look for a white cab. Rain seared your eyeballs, cascaded off the cab sheet. But the storm made a closer partnership of man and machine. Steam was unpredictable. She'd act like a lady in a heat wave or the cold, then snub you if you fed her on small stuff. Wet sludge turned into cement, and she'd have you on your knees before you got to the climbs. She'd fry your breakfast on a shovel and freeze your back for arthritis. You had to be her master, know every nut and bolt, how to seal a burst pipe or change a water gauge. Making time up the valley was a goal every trip. And when the woods beat back that mile-a-minute rhythm, that was teamwork. And there was a pride in keeping it going, whatever God sent. Late August, 1978. The lonely up platform, where wild birds nest close to the windows to watch the last trains of summer. A clay train down from Torrington along the Tor, the only remnant of line beyond Barnstaple. When the Great Western surveyed its own route into North Devon from Taunton, the London South Western bribed the local gentry to oppose it, offering a branch from here to South Moulton. Lord Fortescue challenged their right to deprive thousands of a rail service. Devon wasn't there to await the company's pleasure. The evening train from Exeter comes in for the last lap. The last lap. For train guard beer, it was the first lap, packed with holidaymakers bound for home, sore with standing and sunburn, haggling over reservations, juggling the corner seats for the kids, with grannies all facing the engine. The last lap for train guard Woodger, coming into the junction on a streaming night to listen to a story of headlights flying through the air at the Chapelton crossing. But the splinters of an unfastened door showed how the train had knocked the lamps from the level crossing gates. The last lap for a century of steamers, and that very first train in August 1854. And people from the district packed the river banks to watch it rumble over the 3 iron arches of the Pill Bridge. Over the bridge and into the junction it went. Now all agog with public rejoicing, where officers of the corporation poured corn oil and wine as an oblation, and the provincial grand chaplain offered a prayer to the success of the railway.
Please visit our website for news about new productions that are on the way, and you can support my work on my Patreon page. Thank you.